You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Dailey and Kevin Laramée.
And welcome back to Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One. And Mark, for once in a Formula One show, we have some sort of breaking news. Just came out 9 minutes ago now on the Formula1.com website. After 19 years, it has been announced that this year's Grand Prix in Malaysia is to be the country's last. The decision was taken jointly by Formula One and Sepang International Circuit.
That's a bit of a shame when you think about it. I hadn't actually realized until I saw the press release on Formula1.com that they'd actually been there for that long. I mean, they have been there for that long, but 19 years, and that's a bit of a shame. Sometimes I think it's maybe not the most exciting track, but it definitely is not a nice thing to see the calendar shrinking a little bit. We've already seen this year that we're down to 20 races from 21, and we're going to lose another one, and hopefully next year Germany's back, but never a good thing to lose races from the schedule.
No, never a good thing. So welcome to the Chinese Grand Prix preview as the second open practice is about to start. Me on the East Coast, Mark on the West Coast of North America. We're recording this on Friday morning, basically. Now, Mark, Malaysia, for me, before we start talking about and preview the Chinese Grand Prix, Malaysia has something special for me. In 1999, that's 2 years after Jacques Villeneuve, so 18 months, not even after Jacques Villeneuve won his Grand Prix, and it's in my heyday of the Formula One fandom. That's where it was created just a few years before. So in 1999, I was waking up every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. to go with my father to watch the races at a local sports community center.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was, by the way. But the Grand Prix Malaysia, it was the first new international one, right? You remember back then, it was all Hockenheim, Nürburgring. It was the European, you have Canada, Monaco, and then you have the Interlagos and Australia. But that was pretty much it. You didn't have the Chinese and the Macau or whatever new ones are going to come in the future. You only had the what we call, quote unquote, the classic tracks, right? And then they built the International Sepang Circuit.
That's correct, and that's very much a pioneer for that time. And when that race started, I was just in my very early 20s. I was living in Holland at the time, so unlike you, I was able to enjoy most of the races live at that point in my life. And usually what I would do, I would go to a friend's house who lived just a couple of streets away, and we'd either watch there or go around the corner to a little restaurant, a little cafe where the owner had a big screen projection TV that he would pull it down, and we would sit there when the cafe was closed, the three of us, and just watching the Formula One races on the big screen. And those were some great times. But yeah, it was very much it was the original circuit away from the traditional base in Europe and South America and North America, because even at that time there wasn't really a consistent home for the US Grand Prix. They had some races in Indianapolis, and of course, Montreal's been a staple since the late 1970s, but you're right. It very much kicked off the new generation of Formula One tracks, because in its wake we had after Malaysia there was also Singapore. We've seen races in China, in Bahrain, and Korea, India, also, and Turkey. All these tracks, some of them have come and gone, and some have stayed. And we'll have to wait and see what happens with Singapore, because after the race last fall, even that came out that perhaps that they would not be hosting the Grand Prix there for very much longer.
No, exactly. So let me just read the press release in its entirety. It will answer some of your questions, and you might be happy at the end of this press release. Malaysia joined the F1 calendar in 1999, and both Formula One and SIC, Sepang International Circuit, are determined to make this year's event in October a fitting finale for the groundbreaking circuit. It's always sad this is quote, "It's always sad to say goodbye to a member of the Formula One family," commented Sean Bratches, Managing Director, Commercial Operations of Formula One. "Over nearly 2 decades, the Malaysian Formula One fans have proven themselves to be some of the sport's most passionate supporters. As we said in Melbourne, we have big plans for bringing our global fan base closer to the sport than ever before, providing an enhanced digital experience and creating new events. We're looking forward to taking more about these plans as the season progresses. We will have 21 exciting events to look forward to in the 2018 calendar, with the additions of the French and German races. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Sepang International Circuit for their hospitality and professionalism over the years and their ongoing commitment to motorsport. During its time to Formula One calendar, not only has Malaysia built a loyal F1 fan base, it has also become a major force in motor racing and successfully established itself as a global tourist destination." Mark, 21 exciting events, French and German races.
Well, we knew that they were going to be going back to Paul Ricard for 2018 back even a couple of months ago, but it's good to know that there will be a German Grand Prix, because it seems weird to me that there is no race at either Hockenheim or the Nürburgring. And that for me is one of the staples of the Grand Prix calendar every year, especially when you think how dominant Mercedes has been. And, well, I guess it's a bit of an academic, a bit of a moot point, considering Rosberg walked away last winter. But could you just to me, at any rate, Kevin, it seems strange that we could have had a scenario that this year that they could have had a German Grand Prix with a German world champion driving a German car. And obviously, they're missing 2 of those 3 ingredients.
Obviously, he retired.
Yeah, and then the race got canceled at Hockenheim. But I'm glad to hear that. And
this is maybe more English than German, anyways. But yes.
Well, technically, it's German with the badge on the front of the car. But
yes,
yeah,
technically yes, but the factory and all. But no, you're right.
Now, shall we get to the matter at hand, the Chinese Grand Prix? That's
just before I have another one. It's actually, it gives us a glance of the mindset of an F1 driver. So Romain Grosjean a few hours ago talked to motorsport.com, and the headline is Grosjean, F1 back to where it should be. Romain Grosjean says the new flat-out Formula One is back to where it should be, judging by the impressions he took away from the season-opening Australian Grand Prix. Although the Haas driver did not make it to the finish in Melbourne after stopping with an engine problem, the Frenchman has no doubts that the extra downforce and grip has delivered something that makes things a much bigger challenge for drivers. He says the 2017 cars are really cool to drive, Grosjean told motorsport.com. So you can read that article, obviously, on motorsport.com. But, Mark, I think it's interesting because not the best car, one of the worst cars right now, Haas, Romain Grosjean, loves to drive that car. And that, just the drivers loving to drive that car, we didn't hear that over the last 3 years. The amount of tasks they had to do every single second to save everything took every fun out of it. At least now, the more horsepower, the bigger tire, the downforce seem to have given pleasure back to some drivers.
Well, that's great to hear. And I think that this weekend in China will be a real good indication of where things are going to go for this season, because Albert Park in Melbourne, you don't really see a lot of overtaking there anyways. It's not really conducive to that kind of racing. It's just... I mean, it's kind of a funny track. It's not really a street circuit. It's not really a traditional proper circuit. And it's always been a bit tricky to pass there, right?
Yeah, but it was made for different cars, 30 years ago or so?
Something like that. I mean, they've been there for about 20 years at least.
Yeah, but we always now, we complain there's not enough track space. We have to design tracks for the car we have now. So make the track wider, and maybe that's the solution. But no, so the cars now are so different than the first cars that rode on Albert Park. So it's hard to truly face it. Now, this track was built in 2004, not too far behind in history, where it's more interesting. The longest straightaways in the season is right now, Mark. 1.17 kilometer long straightaway. That's flat out for you.
Well, I think we'll see whether or not some of the drivers like Lewis Hamilton will be proven correct or incorrect this weekend, because with a real long straightaway like you have at the Shanghai International Circuit, there should be a lot of opportunity for drafting, and with the DRS, hopefully some overtaking. And I think last year, was China not the race that saw the most overtaking maneuvers out of the entire 2016 calendar? I believe it was. So in theory, that it should be plenty of opportunities for racing, and it's going to give that opportunity for us to really see what these cars are like. And I don't know. I really hope that Lewis is proven wrong, because he's been saying for quite some time now, probably ever since the first test session at Barcelona back in February, that, oh, well, these cars are not really made for overtaking. And there's even been talk this week that the different Formula One teams are ready to sit down and talk about the problems of overtaking. And Jean Todt had said things like that as well. So we'll have a good indication. And then also, I think the other big question is, besides whether or not they'll be able to pass each other, is, was Ferrari's pace in Melbourne 2 weeks ago, was it for real, or was it just a little bit of good fortune and the fact that Lewis pitted earlier than Sebastian Vettel and then got stuck between himself and Max Verstappen? So those are going to be two extremely interesting things to watch.
No, exactly. We'll know in that 0.75 miles in old measurement system, the longest straight on the circuit on the calendar. 0.75 miles. And we'll know if Ferrari is for real right there. Let's go by Chinese Grand Prix by the numbers really quickly, Mark. I think it's a little bit interesting. It's the 13th Chinese Grand Prix, all at the Shanghai International Circuit. 2004 was the year China debuted on the Formula One calendar. 4 most wins. Guess who?
4 wins? Would it be Sebastian Vettel?
Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton. It had to be one or the other.
Exactly. 56 number of laps in the 2017 Chinese Grand Prix. 3.387 miles length of the circuit. As mentioned before, 0.75 miles. The fastest lap is Michael Schumacher in 2004, a minute 32.238. And that will be interesting because I believe this record might be in jeopardy this weekend. I believe that this record might be able to be beaten with the new regulations.
Well, we've already seen that this year back at Barcelona in winter testing. Mark Webber's pole time, I think that he set back in 2010, was smashed by, I think it was Valtteri Bottas in one of the practice sessions and one of the test sessions. And then we saw that in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, that they broke the lap record as well. So the cars are definitely faster this year. There's no doubt about it. So we'll have to wait and see whether this trend continues or not. And at this point, there is no reason to believe that it won't. But who will be the driver to do it? Will it be in a scarlet red Ferrari? Will it be in the silver Mercedes? Or could it be in the Red Bull? Because for me, I was disappointed with what I saw from Red Bull in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. Not only did Ricciardo have all sorts of problems, basically right from when he stepped into the car, getting to the circuits on Thursday or Friday, but I mean, he had a dreadful qualifying session and crashed out, and it just sort of snowballed from there. But even Verstappen, who had a relatively problem-free weekend, he just lacked the pace. He was not really in a position to do very Max-like things. So they have a little ways to go. And there's been some things said this week this is nothing new, because Horner and other people at Red Bull have said this already this year, that they believe that the course of the development for this car is very promising, and that they've proven in previous years that they can outdevelop their rivals in season. So
they did it last year. They did it like last year. That's what they did. They out Ferrari like easily.
Well, and they're going to have to, because they're clearly right now the best of the rest. And well, they were, I think, somewhat cautious and maybe tempered expectations after winter testing that the car wasn't quite living up to what it could be. I mean, they didn't say it so much there. They just, the way that they worded it was there's a lot of room for growth and development, which, if you kind of read between the lines a little bit, is, yeah, we've got a good car, but it's not great. But we know that we can do certain things in certain areas that we can improve on throughout the year to make it better. And of course, we'll have to wait and see whether or not there can be more gains made with the power in the Renault engine. So definitely there is potential there. But for me, the question is, are they going to be able to build on that and find increases on the track right now? Or are we looking, say, a couple of races down the road at maybe Spain or Monaco, or maybe even as far away as Canada?
Yeah, that's interesting. And as the second session is delayed as well because of the mist that is engulfing the takeoff area of the emergency helicopter, this is the reason why this session is delayed once again. Who's your favorite in this weekend, Mark? It's the second weekend of the season. We had the Australian Grand Prix with the surprise Ferrari win. Ferrari hasn't won a back-to-back race since Alonso in 2011, I believe. Is it the year where that is finally done? Because even before the last win in 2015, actually not 2015, there were wins before 2 weeks ago. Before that, stringing wins has not been easy for the Scuderia.
No, it hasn't. And as thrilled and as happy as I was to see Vettel win that race in Melbourne the other week, and well, honestly, if it was anybody else than a Mercedes, I think I would have been equally happy just to see somebody break the expectation that it would be either Hamilton or Bottas on the top step of the podium. But I think it was great because last year was just dreadful for Ferrari. They struggled, and I didn't think that we'd be sitting here at the end of 2016 saying, well, this is a year that Ferrari had not won a race. So at least from that point of view, it was a great start to the season for them. But until they can prove that it wasn't just a flash in the pan, I have to say, and I'm not really happy to say it, but I can't not predict Lewis Hamilton winning, right? And as great as it was to see that Ferrari result, until it's proven that they can beat Mercedes on a consistent basis, I think you still have to almost go with that default conclusion that it is Mercedes and Hamilton that are going to be the team to beat. Hopefully I'm proven wrong, and I'd like to see a competitive Ferrari team and a Red Bull and whoever else can get up there. But realistically, I think until proven otherwise, Mercedes are still the top team.
To be the man, you have to beat the man, and once is not enough. You have to do it more than once. So we'll see if Ferrari can continue. If we go to the earlier result today, before the session was red flag due to the same mist as right now, Lance Stroll had the third best time for Williams, the Canadian kid, but no Ferrari or Mercedes has completed a lap time at that point, so it's not necessarily worth anything. But I'm going to be very interesting to see how Lance Stroll does, because he didn't finish last race. He did not have the best weekend, but during the race he showed something. He showed why he had that car with something overtaking, why he earned and kind of paid for the wheel. But he I think he is learning a lot quickly, but that kid has won everywhere.
Well, that's just the thing. I mean, he's obviously the reigning European Formula 3 champion, and he's won every series that he's raced in. I mean, that's very impressive for a guy that's only 18 years old. I mean, that's almost unheard of. I mean, he's very accomplished, but going to Formula 1 from Formula 3 is obviously a very, very big step for Lance. And I thought at times
you got what you would expect from Stroll in Australia. At times you saw that he has the talent and he has the speed, and at other times he still looked like a young guy that's in a very powerful car and still learning the ropes. And I think that's probably going to be the theme for the entire year. I think we'll see flashes of his potential, but I think largely he'll be figuring it out as he goes. And hopefully when we sit here at the end of November and look back and reminisce on the season, that we can say, wow, that the learning curve that Stroll was on over the course of the year was a quick one. And who knows, the Williams, I think, is still not where it could be. There's been some very interesting things that have been said by Paddy Lowe, who is the new chief technical officer at Williams. And of course, he has the pedigree. I mean, he's been with Mercedes for the last several years, so he knows how to win. He's been with a winning team, and he's a very brilliant engineer. So that's just the kind of guy that a team like Williams needs, because they just haven't quite been there over the last couple of years. 2 years ago, they had a fairly competitive season where they were basically one of those teams that on their day, you could probably see them on a P3 on the podium. And last year they regressed a little bit and the car wasn't quite as good as it was in 2015. So whether or not we'll see Lance Stroll pushing Felipe Massa, yeah, I don't know. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but I think maybe at times we might. But it'll be interesting to watch Lance over this course of his rookie season.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Sorry, I was got muted here. It happens sometimes when you mute yourself and you forgot to unmute the button. But no, for Stroll, it'll be very interesting, Mark. But this weekend, I'm going to go with the same vein as you were before with my prediction. Until proven otherwise, it's hard not to predict Lewis Hamilton to get his first victory of 2017, but I'm open for surprises, and I'm kind of hoping for surprising as well.
Well, that's a very good point, Kevin. And just because with this new season and the new cars and the bigger tires and everything, it's really going to take, I think, for me, the first several races of the season before I think I can really say, okay, now I'm kind of comfortable in knowing what's going on. I think I've got my finger on the pulse of what's going to happen. These are the teams that have got it figured out, and these are the teams that aren't. And not only at the front of the grid, but I think as the season kind of unfolds, it's going to be interesting where things are going to unfold in the middle of the grid. And there were a couple of interesting things that were said this week by some of the former employees and designers at Manor Racing, who reckoned that they had designed a very competitive car. Well, obviously, I don't think they had designed a car, and that admittedly it wasn't going to win any races, but they reckoned that they had made a substantial move forward, and they would be a competitive midfield team this year. Unfortunately, we'll never find out for sure, but at least what we saw in Australia, that middle of the pack looks quite competitive. So we'll see it again this weekend. And like you were saying at the beginning of the show, how you were disappointed with the performance by Haas in the very first race of the season. Will they be a better team? Because they had a double DNF in Australia, and last year, Grosjean, he had, what was it, P6? He had a phenomenal, a
phenomenal beginning of the season,
yes.
So much so where people were so happy, and they won the points in the first race, I believe.
Well, it was the first couple of races.
They won the points in Australia, and in China was third Grand Prix last year. I forgot which one was the second last year.
Yeah, they went to Bahrain last year for the second race. Yeah. It sort of slightly changed this year, but you're correct. They scored points in the first couple of races, and I think they surprised a lot of people to the point where there were quite a lot of comments being made. Well, it's not really their own car. They're just throwing a lot of Ferrari parts on there and a Ferrari engine in the back, and it's basically not really anything than a Ferrari with a different paint scheme on there. I mean, obviously that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's true. They did very well. And then I think after the first couple of races, they really started to perform like we expected. A team that was brand new and was obviously struggling. They were having problems with the car. And obviously as the year went on, they had problems with brakes, and they didn't have a lot of data on the tracks that they were going to. So, I mean, they were
basically running a year-long test program. So to see a double DNF in Australia, I think was disappointing for them. And I think that Haas would probably admit that themselves. So will they be able to turn it around this weekend? And I thought that Renault was maybe a little bit underwhelming in Australia. So we'll see whether or not they can turn it around. And Force India as well, I expected a little bit more. So Perez has been saying that he figures that they got a better car that they have there. So the middle of the pack is definitely going to be fascinating to watch this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 quotes to finish just show, Mark. This is Chinese Grand Prix related, kind of, because it happened with the drivers talking to the press yesterday. Fernando Alonso rules out quitting F1 mid-season. So no, even though they might struggle, he's not going to quit mid-season. And in the same vein, the same interview, Scrum, you mentioned as well that for him, Ferrari are definite title contenders. A world champion is saying this after only one race. So that might give more credence to the victory of Vettel 2 weeks ago.
Well, he definitely looked extremely happy after winning in Australia 2 weeks ago. And he would know, I mean, he's a 4-time world champion, and he was won all of those titles when he was with Red Bull, of course, and when they were dominating Formula One. So if he's predicting good things, then he obviously has good reason to, because last year he was, I thought, fairly candid and quite blunt at times when he was discussing some of the issues that Ferrari was happening. So I think it would be good, because as impressive as it has been to watch Mercedes over the last 3 years since the previous sets of regulations came into effect in 2014, it has almost become a little bit too boring and predictable. I mean, of course, you had a couple of exciting season finales in Bahrain in 2014, and then last year again between Rosberg and Hamilton. It was always between those two guys. So to be able to throw another team into the mix, and maybe even another one if Red Bull can get their act together, that would be great.
You can follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramée, and you can follow the Sports Podcast Network at SportsPodNet. Every show we produce on the Sports Podcasting Network is available at sportspodcastingnetwork.com. Mark, it's going to be fun. Great weekend in China, and I can't wait to see you for the review.
Likewise, Kevin, I can't wait till the green light gets switched on in Shanghai. And I'm looking forward to, like yourself, to a great weekend of Formula One racing. And we will be back on Monday night to discuss it all and break down everything that happens over the course of the weekend here on Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed on Formula One racing. Give us a follow on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod. And that is a wrap for now. We will catch you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.